The moment I stepped into the banquet room, something inside me went quiet. The place looked like it had been pulled straight out of a magazine, white roses everywhere, gold balloons spelling out my name, a crystal chandelier dripping light over tables wrapped in silk. It was beautiful, I guess. Just not mine. I could smell the perfume of polished money, the faint scent of roses, expensive champagne, and something colder underneath. Everyone was dressed for a celebration, but the smiles weren't for me. Their eyes were fixed on my father, Harland Cottrell, standing near the bar like a senator holding court. He looked alive in that kind of room, owning it, commanding it. People leaned in when he spoke, laughed even when he didn't say anything funny. My sister Roxanne had planned it all. Of course, she did. Her taste was loud, flawless, and absolutely detached from who I was. I preferred quiet dinners, a few close friends, laughter that didn't echo off walls. This party, this performance, was for them, not me. I smiled anyway. Because that's what I've always done. As I walked through the crowd, I caught myself thinking of something my mother once said before she died: some celebrations are just performances with better lighting. She was right. I nodded and smiled at faces that didn't really see me, shaking hands that felt colder than the champagne flutes they held. Roxanne was the first to spot me. There she is, the woman of the hour. Her tone was too polished, her eyes scanning me like she was checking for imperfections. She kissed my cheek, left a red print, and pulled me toward a group already laughing at something Dad said. Harland looked up, glass in hand. "There's our dreamer," he said with that grin that made people think he was charming. I laughed politely, though inside I felt the old sting, that familiar reminder that I was never quite the daughter he wanted. As the night went on, I noticed how everyone orbited him. Even Tanya, my stepmother, kept her words few but her eyes everywhere, watching him like a shadow. Roxanne's friends circled him, too, tossing compliments about his incredible legacy. It was my birthday, but it felt more like his anniversary with power. A waiter passed by, handing me a drink. "Here you go, Miss Cottrell." Miss. Not Mrs. The word hit harder than it should have. I'd been divorced for 5 years, but moments like that still reminded me of how the world defines you by what you've lost. I tried small talk, weather, work, travel, but somehow every conversation found its way back to Roxanne. Her new house, her charity, her husband's promotion. Dad interrupted twice when I spoke, patting my arm each time. "That's our little dreamer again," he said, half laughing. People chuckled, and I nodded, pretending not to care. But every word scraped. Every time he called me little, I felt myself shrink. From the edge of the room, I watched them all, the alliances, the quiet glances, the way Roxanne leaned toward Dad like a mirror image. I could almost hear the gears of approval turning. I'd seen this my entire life, love measured by obedience. A memory slipped in before I could stop it, my 16th birthday. He hadn't shown up that night either. Told Mom he was too busy keeping the family afloat. I'd waited by the window until the candles melted down to nothing. Mom tried to make it better with cake and silence, but silence has its own sound. Back in the present, I saw Roxanne whisper something to Tanya. They laughed, soft but sharp enough for me to feel it. My phone buzzed. A text from my old friend Lydia: "You okay? You look like you're watching your own movie." I typed back, "Maybe I am." Then, Dad tapped his glass with a fork. The sound sliced through the chatter. Everyone turned to face him. He stood tall, smiling like a man about to give a victory speech. "Let's raise a glass," he began. "To Sherry, my youngest. She may not always be invited, but she always finds her way back." The room erupted in laughter. Even Roxanne threw her head back, clapping her hands. It took a second for everyone to realize it wasn't really a joke, but by then, it didn't matter. The damage was done. My hand trembled as I lifted my glass. My throat tightened, but I smiled. That's what good daughters do, they stay graceful even when the knife's already in. Across the table, Tanya's eyes met mine. There was pity there and warning. Inside, something cracked. Humiliation feels like heat, spreading fast, invisible, unstoppable. I swallowed it down with champagne. Dinner carried on. Laughter returned in forced bursts. I kept still, counting the seconds until it would be over. But fate wasn't done yet. One of Dad's business friends leaned over, grinning. "So, Harland, are we doing this again next year?" Dad smirked, didn't even look at me. "Oh, Sherry won't be part of that one. She's not invited anymore, her seat's already spoken for." A few gasps. Nervous laughter. I froze. My pulse drummed in my ears. I looked right at him and said, "That's all right. I've been standing for years." The air thinned. You could feel the confusion ripple across the table. Roxanne shifted in her chair. "Relax," she said, forcing a smile. "It's just a joke." "Then why does it sound like the truth?" I said softly. For the first time all night, Dad had nothing to say. The band started up again, music trying to fill the silence. I turned to leave when his phone, lying on the table, began to ring. Loud. The screen flashed, "Unknown caller." He answered it with that same careless confidence. "Hello?" And then my own voice came through. Calm, steady, unmistakable. "Dad, are you proud now?" The room went dead silent. Harlan's face drained of color. Tanya's fork slipped from her hand. Roxanne stared, mouth open. I didn't move. Didn't speak. I just watched him. For once, he couldn't hide behind charm or control. His hand shook. The phone kept ringing, long after he dropped it onto the table. The drive home felt longer than it should have been. The road was quiet, washed in the rhythm of streetlights flashing across my windshield. I didn't play music. I just let the hum of the tires fill the space between my thoughts. My phone vibrated over and over on the passenger seat, messages from people who wanted to pretend they cared. "Sorry about Dad's joke. You okay? You know how he is." I didn't answer any of them. When I stopped at a red light, I caught the faint scent of my father's cologne on my jacket. He'd hugged me before the toast, one of those polite, stiff embraces that meant nothing. The smell made my chest tighten. I rolled down the window and let the cold air cut through it. I turned on the radio, but every song seemed to say the same thing in different words: "You were never really seen." I whispered to myself, when people laugh at you long enough, silence starts sounding like revenge. It came out steadier than I felt. By the time I pulled into my driveway, it was close to midnight. The porch light flickered once before staying on. I got out slowly, taking a moment just to breathe before stepping inside. The house was still and neat, too neat. Everything in its perfect place, like a museum exhibit of a life that looked functional but wasn't lived in. I tossed my keys onto the counter, the sound too loud in the silence. The air smelled faintly of lavender cleaner and something older, loneliness, maybe. I glanced at the photos lining the hallway, birthdays, graduations, family dinners. In every one, my father's smile was the biggest thing in the frame. Even when I was a kid, he seemed to take up all the space. I remembered one of his favorite sayings: "Family is the stage where you learn to play your part." I'd spent years perfecting mine: quiet, polite, agreeable. Tonight, it hit me how well I'd learned the role. I muttered, "I played mine so well, I forgot my real lines." There was a small cardboard box on the kitchen counter, something I'd mailed to myself from Mom's old house last week. I slid it open with my car keys. Inside was a voice recorder, Mom's old one. She used to record grocery lists and reminders. I'd kept it because it was one of the few things that still held her voice. Curiosity won over exhaustion. I clicked the play button. But it wasn't my mother's voice that came out. It was mine. Younger, more hopeful. I froze. "I just wanted to thank my dad," the voice said, shaky but clear, "for teaching me how silence can be louder than words." The room went cold. I knew that recording. It was the one I made years ago, rehearsing a speech for his retirement dinner, the one he never let me give. My throat tightened. That was the same voice, the same tone that had come through his phone at the party. I set the recorder down like it had burned me. Someone had gotten hold of it, sent it to him. But who? Tanya? She'd always been too observant, too quiet. Roxanne? She loved a show, but this felt deliberate. Or maybe it was something else. Timing. Fate. Retribution. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the recorder. The ticking clock was the only sound. My mind went to my therapist's voice, from years back: "Boundaries aren't walls, Sherry. They're doors, you decide who gets to walk through." I whispered, "I built mine without a handle." Through the window, the backyard was just a dark outline. I could almost see my 16-year-old self sitting out there, waiting for my dad to show up. Waiting for an apology that never came. He used to tell me, "You always take things too seriously, Sherry. That's why no one can joke around you." I exhaled sharply. "No one jokes with me," I said into the quiet. "They joke at me." The words landed heavier than I expected. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't one of the usual names. Just an unknown number. One new message. "He finally heard you tonight. You're welcome." My hands went still. The message sat there on the screen, glowing in the dark kitchen. My pulse quickened, but it wasn't fear, it was something sharper. I picked up the recorder again, pressed play. My own voice echoed back, the same words that had haunted the room hours earlier. Then I replayed the message's audio attachment. The same voice. Identical. I looked around the room, half expecting someone to step out from the shadows. Nothing. Just me. "Who are you?" I said quietly, though some part of me already suspected Roxanne. She'd always loved having the upper hand. But if it was her, she'd want credit. Whoever this was didn't. That scared me, and thrilled me a little. A strange calm came over me, like the kind that follows a storm. Maybe for once, I wasn't the one being laughed at. By 2 a.m., I finally made my way to bed, though I didn't bother changing clothes. I just lay there, eyes open, tracing the faint cracks in the ceiling. My mind kept circling back to that voice, those words. At 2:14, the phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a call. From the same unknown number. I walked into the living room, each step deliberate. The glow of the phone cut through the dark. Then, without warning, the sound filled the air again. "Dad, are you proud now?" It wasn't coming from the recorder this time. It was my phone, speaking in my voice, echoing through my house. I stared at it, my reflection caught in the black screen, and said softly, "You're calling the wrong number this time." But the question that followed wouldn't let me rest. What if someone else was still listening? 2 days after the party, my phone buzzed just as I was finishing a cup of coffee. A text from Roxanne lit up the screen. "Dad wants us all at the house. He says it's urgent." I stared at it for a while. Part of me wanted to delete it and go back to pretending that night never happened. But curiosity, or maybe pride, kept me from doing that. I needed to see what kind of man my father would be when the laughter stopped echoing. The drive to Houston felt longer than usual, even though I knew every turn, every billboard, every stretch of highway by heart. The closer I got, the more I rehearsed the conversation in my head. Stay calm, stay smart, don't let them drag you back into the same dance. The neighborhood looked the same, manicured lawns, neat mailboxes, American flags swaying lazily, but the house itself seemed smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was finally big enough to see it for what it was. I thought of a quote I once read by Maya Angelou, "I can be changed by what happens to me. But I refuse to be reduced by it." I repeated it under my breath like armor. When I stepped inside, the air smelled of polished wood and old perfume. The living room hadn't changed since my mother's funeral. Same beige couch, same floral curtains, same framed photos arranged like a timeline of his pride. Harlan sat in his leather armchair, his throne, looking as if he'd been waiting for an audience. Roxanne flitted around him, pouring coffee, pretending this was a normal family gathering. Tanya stood in the kitchen doorway, half hidden, arms crossed. "Glad you could make it, kiddo," my father said, his tone somewhere between command and courtesy. "You didn't give me much of a choice," I replied, walking in. He smiled, thin and tight. "Well, family talks things through. That's what we do." That was a lie. My family never talked things through. We buried them, smiled for pictures, and pretended the ground wasn't cracking. Roxanne handed me a cup, too sweet, too careful. The clinking of spoons was the only sound. No one mentioned the party. Not yet. Finally, Dad broke the silence. "About the other night you overreacted," he said it like a diagnosis, not an opinion. "Everyone knew it was a joke, but you embarrassed the family. That's not who we are." For a moment, I just stared at him. He had turned my humiliation into my fault so effortlessly, like muscle memory. Roxanne chimed in, her voice dripping with rehearsed sympathy. "You made Dad look bad, Sherry. People were uncomfortable." I smiled, not kindly. "So was I, For 45 years. The words hit harder than I intended. Dad laughed, that sharp, dismissive sound he used when cornered. Trauma. You always did love to play the victim. I leaned back in my chair. No, I just stopped volunteering for your script. He frowned, shifting in his seat. You've got quite the mouth lately. Maybe all that time alone made you think you're smarter than everyone else. Or maybe it just made me honest, I said quietly. The air changed then, heavy, charged. Roxanne pretended to sip her coffee. Tanya's gaze flickered between us, like she was watching a storm gather. And then Tanya spoke, her voice breaking the tension cleanly. Harland, she didn't send that recording. The room froze. My father's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I found it on your phone, she said, her tone even. Weeks ago. You had it saved. Roxanne set her cup down too fast. What? That doesn't make sense. Why would he? Tanya didn't look at her. He saved it, Roxanne. I saw the file myself. Dad's face turned red. That's ridiculous, he snapped. You don't know what you're talking about. But I knew that look in his eyes, caught off guard, furious that someone had broken script. I turned to him. You knew about it, didn't you? You knew that recording existed, and you still used it to make a joke out of me. He said nothing. Just clenched his jaw and looked away. Roxanne tried to patch the silence. Tanya must be mistaken. Dad wouldn't do something like that. I stood slowly, my voice low and steady. He would. He already did. You wanted me humiliated twice, once by your words, and once by mine. For a second, no one moved. Then Dad slammed his cup onto the table, coffee splashing onto the carpet. You've always blamed me for everything wrong in your life, he shouted. I didn't raise my voice. No, I've just stopped pretending you're right. He leaned forward, face flushed. You can't even keep a marriage, a job, or a friend. You've always been chaos. You should thank me for trying to help you. I looked straight at him. And yet, I'm still the only one who showed up for myself. The words hung there. Tanya's expression softened, something human flickering behind her practiced calm. Roxanne looked small for once, unsure whose side to stand on. Dad sat back, breathing hard, eyes glassy with the kind of anger that only comes from losing control. I picked up my bag. You both knew the truth, I said to Roxanne and Tanya. Next time he lies, it'll be on you. No one tried to stop me. I walked down the hallway lined with family photos, each one now looking like evidence instead of memory. Outside, the sun was setting. The porch light flickered on as if it sensed I wouldn't be back soon. The air smelled like rain, thick and expectant. I got into my car, closed the door, and sat there for a long moment, breathing. My phone buzzed, a new notification. It was a photo Dad had just posted online. All of us sitting in that same living room, mid-conversation, smiles frozen in pretense. The caption read, "Family always finds its way back together." I laughed under my breath. Even lies look wholesome in daylight. Then the screen refreshed. One new email appeared in my inbox. The subject line made my stomach tighten. From, unknown, the recording. The real storm, it seemed, had just begun. It was late, the kind of quiet hour when even the refrigerator hum felt too loud. I sat at my desk, half pretending to work, half replaying my father's words from the meeting. The ones meant to sound reasonable but sliced anyway. My laptop screen glowed softly in the dark, a pile of open tabs that I wasn't really reading. Then, the chime. A new email. Subject line, FYI, you might want to see this. No sender name. Just a string of random letters and numbers. For a second, I thought about deleting it. I'd had enough surprises for 1 week. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Inside was a forwarded thread of emails, my father's name in bold, Roxanne's just beneath it. I scrolled down. My stomach turned cold. They weren't talking to me. They were talking about me. Phrases jumped out from the screen like slaps. Sherry's been acting erratic lately. She's still obsessing over old family matters. It's best to limit her involvement for everyone's sake. They were painting a picture. A fragile, unstable woman who couldn't be trusted. To relatives. To business partners. To anyone who'd ever known me. I leaned back, the air catching in my throat. Betrayal doesn't break you. It edits who you trust. I clicked again, scrolling further. A file was attached, trust_revisions.docx. My finger hovered before opening it. I already knew what I'd find. There it was, a new draft of the family trust. My name was gone. Roxanne's was in my place. The explanation was neatly written, almost polite. Given Sherry's recent behavior, we agree she's unfit to handle family assets responsibly. Dated one day after the party. I whispered to the empty room, so that's what the meeting was really about. The anger came slow, like heat creeping up your spine before it bursts. I pushed back from the desk and started pacing. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. I laughed once, bitter, sharp. Manipulation always dresses up as concern. My father had been protecting the family, all right, just not from outsiders. From me. I sat again and opened my sent folder. I needed to see how deep this went. Months back, I'd sent Roxanne a tax document for something minor. I found the email. There it was, forwarded to Dad, with a note from her, told you she's still keeping tabs on things she shouldn't. I scrolled faster. There were more. Dozens. Private emails, copied to him. Things I'd written late at night, sometimes personal, sometimes raw. Things he should never have read. My pulse thudded in my ears. I remembered him insisting a year ago that he install security software on my laptop. Said it was for data protection. I'd believed him. Now, I knew better. He'd been watching me. Not just in public, but here, in the one place I'd thought was mine. He didn't just humiliate me, I whispered, he's been spying on me. I sat still for a long minute, staring at the glow of the screen, the tiny blinking cursor at the end of his words. A reminder that even silence could be recorded. Then my phone buzzed on the desk. Tanya's name flashed across the screen. I hesitated before answering. Tanya? Her voice was low, urgent. Sherry, listen carefully. Don't open any more links from that email. They're tracking you. I froze, hand hovering over the mouse. What? I overheard them, she said. Your father and Roxanne. They were planning this. They want to paint you as unstable before you can challenge the trust. I swallowed hard. He's really doing this. He's not protecting a legacy, she said, her voice shaking. He's protecting his image. Even from his own blood. The line went quiet. I stared at the monitor. The email was still open. Every word suddenly looked like bait. I turned off the Wi-Fi. The click of the switch sounded like a decision. Then I opened the drawer on my right. Inside was a small notebook labeled Mom's Things. The pages smelled faintly of paper gone soft with time. I flipped through them, her handwriting looping and clean, little notes about family bills, bank accounts, insurance details. Halfway through, something caught my eye. A bank statement from years ago. A transfer, large, unexplained. My father's signature beneath it. I whispered, you built your empire on her silence. The fury that had been trembling inside of me finally stilled. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. I took out a pen and began writing. Dates. Names. Bank numbers. Lies I'd ignored. Patterns I'd excused. The more I wrote, the steadier my hand became. This wasn't revenge. It was record keeping. The kind that doesn't vanish under laughter or denial. Hours passed unnoticed. The room grew darker, my desk lamp the only light left in the house. Then, just as I was finishing the last line in the notebook, my laptop screen flickered back to life. The Wi-Fi had somehow reconnected on its own. A new email appeared. This time, from my father's company domain. Subject, cease and desist. My breath caught. I opened it. Any further defamation against the Cottrell family will result in legal action. He was moving faster now, trying to cut me off before I found my footing. But he was too late. I closed the laptop slowly. My reflection stared back at me in the black screen, tired, yes, but not afraid. Let's play, then, I said quietly. This time, I wouldn't be the one they silenced. The morning light came in too sharp, cutting through the blinds like it had something to prove. I was awake before my alarm, though I couldn't remember actually falling asleep. The cease and desist email still glowed on my phone screen from the night before. I read it again, line by line, like a confession written in legal tone. The phrasing was precise, cold, polished, and impersonal. That was my father's style. The signature at the bottom caught my attention, Henry Vale, attorney at law. I knew that name. He was the same man who toasted my father at his retirement dinner years ago. calling him a pillar of integrity. So, I muttered into the empty kitchen, he's using the same people who toasted me to take me down. I poured a cup of coffee, black and hot, but it might as well have been water. My mind was already moving miles ahead of my body, strategizing, calculating, trying to find the edges of the trap I'd walked into. The house was quiet except for the steady hum of the refrigerator, a mechanical kind of peace. It wasn't calm. It was waiting. By mid-morning, I needed to get out of the house. I drove to a small coffee shop downtown, one of those quiet places where people worked alone and pretended not to notice anyone else. Neutral ground. I picked a corner table with my back to the wall and opened my laptop. I typed Henry Vale into the search bar. His professional page came up first, neat and self-congratulatory. A few scrolls later, I found his LinkedIn profile. There it was, his latest post, bragging about defending legacy estates from internal threats. The comment section caught my eye. Someone had written beneath it, "Didn't you handle that fraudulent trust revision too?" He hadn't replied. I took a screenshot immediately. My pulse quickened, not panic, but something sharper. Evidence. It wasn't proof yet, but it was a crack. And cracks had a way of spreading. I remembered Mom's old notes, the ones I'd found in her notebook. I pulled the binder labeled Truth from my bag and flipped through it. Her handwriting was still steady even in those final months. Her attention to detail was better than any accountant's. If this lawyer's had been involved with the estate before, it might connect everything, the trust, the missing funds, even her final note. My phone rang. Tanya. Again. I hesitated before answering, half expecting her voice to sound different this time, colder, maybe. It didn't. "Sherry," she said quickly, "I needed to warn you. Harlan's furious. He told Roxanne to stop talking to me. He said I'm too close to the problem." I smiled faintly. "That's one way to put it." "He's spreading things," she continued. "He's telling people you're unstable. Vindictive. That you are trying to destroy the family reputation." I stared out the cafe window at the traffic lights blinking red, yellow, green, orderly, predictable, unlike us. "That's his favorite word, isn't it? Family." Tanya's voice cracked. "He made us believe silence was loyalty." I answered softly, "Silence is just obedience in a nicer dress." She went quiet for a beat, then said, "He's planning something big. I overheard him talking about interviews, maybe even a press release. He wants to make it look like you're ungrateful for everything he's done." I let out a slow breath. "Then it's time to paint back." She didn't reply, but I could tell she understood. Before hanging up, she whispered, "Be careful, Sherry. You're not safe around them anymore." When the call ended, I sat there for a while, letting the words settle. Not safe. That used to mean physical danger. Now, it meant reputational death, a quieter kind of erasure. I opened my old cloud drive, the one the family used to share for photos and tax documents. I hadn't logged in for years, but the password still worked. Folders appeared, neatly organized by date. One caught my attention, Estate Review 2017. I clicked it open. Dozens of PDFs loaded, all labeled with Mom's name. Bank statements. Insurance forms. Nothing unusual until I saw one more file buried at the bottom. Mom's note, final. Text. My throat tightened. It was a scan of her handwriting, familiar and careful, every letter slanted the same way. The note read, "If anything happens to me, check account 9724, it's not for him, it's for her." For a second, I couldn't breathe. Her. That was me. The timestamp showed it was written 2 weeks before she died. I sat back in my chair, the cafe sounds fading into a blur. She'd known. Maybe not everything, but enough to see what kind of man she was leaving behind. Enough to protect me, even if I didn't understand it then. I printed the file as soon as I got home and slipped it into the binder. The pages made a soft rustling sound, like the past whispering, "You're not crazy. You were right all along." I didn't cry. Not this time. I just felt a calm I hadn't known in years. It wasn't forgiveness. It was focus. Sometimes anger isn't a flame. It's a lens. I wrote a new list in my notebook. Verify account 9724. Track Henry Vale's involvement. Cross-check Mom's financial notes. Gather proof quietly. No confrontation yet. Let them show their hand first. I closed the book and stared out the window. The sky was heavy with clouds, the kind that promised a storm but took their time delivering it. I was organizing the last of my files when my printer suddenly came to life. The sound startled me, paper feeding, ink moving. I hadn't pressed anything. One page slid out. Just one. Bold black letters stretched across the center. Stop digging. No sender information. No network connection. Nothing that made sense. I stared at it for a long time, then placed it neatly on top of my binder. My pulse was steady. Now I know I'm close, I said quietly. The warning wasn't fear. It was confirmation. The paper still sat on my coffee table, the words burned into my eyes, stop digging. I stared at it, trying to convince myself it was a prank, a glitch, anything ordinary. But it wasn't. The page was fresh, no watermark, no trace of where it came from. My wireless printer had spat it out on its own, and the timestamp in my computer log was blank. I checked the security camera app on my phone. The feed was blacked out from 8 o'clock to 10:15 p.m., the exact window when the message appeared. My pulse quickened, but I didn't panic. Fear was a luxury I'd already spent years paying for. I called Tanya. It rang twice, then cut off. I tried again. Voicemail. I whispered to myself, if they wanted me scared, they should have tried 10 years ago. I grabbed my car keys and the binder marked truth. If someone wanted me to stop, that meant I was close to something worth finding. The roads downtown were almost empty. I parked 2 blocks from my father's office, the tall glass tower that still carried his name, Harland Cottrell and Associates. I still had my old security badge from when I used to help with bookkeeping. Back then, I thought being part of his world meant belonging. Now, it felt like trespassing into a lie I'd once believed. The lobby was dimly lit, the hum of fluorescent lights echoing against marble floors. I kept my head down and walked toward the elevators, pressing the button for the 14th floor. The smell of cleaning solution and old paper filled the air. The office door clicked open with my badge. Inside, everything was just as I remembered, tidy, sterile, too clean for the kind of dirt I knew hid in the books. I moved through the corridors quietly until I reached the archive room. Rows of cabinets lined the walls, the kind no one checks unless they're looking for ghosts. I pulled open a drawer marked Legacy Adjustments. It was all there. Invoices, donation records, and buried beneath them, a folder stamped confidential. I opened it and started flipping through the papers. Emails between my father and Henry Vale. Subject line, Widows Fund Reallocation. One sentence jumped out like a knife, reallocate $25K from Widows Fund to PR expenditures. No one will notice. My breath caught. He had stolen from the very people he used to brag about helping. I took pictures of everything. My hands shook, but my movements were steady. This wasn't revenge. It was documentation. Just as I closed the folder, footsteps echoed from the hallway. "Hello?" A man's voice called out. A security guard. I ducked behind one of the cabinets, clutching my phone against my chest. The beam of a flashlight swept across the room, pausing near the door. "You're not supposed to be here," he muttered to himself. He lingered for a moment longer, then turned and walked away. I waited until his footsteps faded before slipping out. My heels made no sound on the carpet, though my heart thundered louder than his radio static. Outside, the night air hit me like cold water. I stood under the flickering streetlight, staring up at the giant letters of my father's name carved into the building. "You built your name on everyone else's silence," I said quietly. I drove home with the windows down, trying to shake off the rush of adrenaline. But as soon as I stepped inside, my phone buzzed with a new message. An audio file. No name attached. I pressed play. My father's voice came through instantly, calm, calculated, familiar. "She's getting too close," he said. Then Roxanne's voice, "What about Tanya? She'll understand the cost of loyalty." I froze. The phrase looped in my head like static. The cost of loyalty. I tried calling Tanya again. This time, her number went straight to voicemail. Something inside me shifted. Fear was gone. In its place was something harder, a protective fury I hadn't felt in years. I opened my journal and wrote one line at the top of a blank page: "They control through fear, but fear dies when faced with truth." Then I opened my laptop and began working. I organized every photo, every email, every document into a single encrypted folder. I labeled it evidence_complete. Then I drafted an email to an old college friend, a lawyer now, attaching the file. The subject line read, "If anything happens to me." The message was short: "Release this to the press immediately." I clicked send and closed the computer. My reflection stared back at me from the dark screen, tired eyes, steady hands. Mom once told me, kindness is not weakness, it's strategy. For the first time, I understood what she meant. I gathered the binder, locked it in a drawer, and double-checked every window and door. Then I turned off the lights. Outside, a pair of headlights flickered through the curtains. A black car idled across the street, engine humming low. I stepped closer to the window, the glow of the street lamp cutting across my face. "You're late, Dad," I whispered. My phone buzzed again. One message. From Tanya. It was only one word. Run. By the time I turned off the light, the world outside was no longer safe. Tanya's message kept echoing in my head, run. The word followed me into sleep and back out again. When I opened my eyes, dawn was just breaking, pale and quiet, too quiet. I sat up and looked out the window. The black car was gone, but the tire tracks were still pressed into the street like scars. The house was still. Even the birds outside seemed to be holding their breath. I picked up my phone, no calls, no threats, not even spam. The silence felt heavier than noise. I remembered something my mother once said while she was folding laundry: sometimes silence isn't peace. It's the sound of power being planned. I stood there, staring out at my own driveway. This was my house. My name was on the mortgage, the deed, the bills. I had rebuilt this place brick by brick after the divorce, after the humiliation. I wasn't about to let fear make me a guest in my own home. "I won't live scared in a house I built with my own hands," I said out loud. The words steadied me. By mid-morning, I drove to the police station. The sky was the color of tin, dull, untrustworthy. Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. I walked to the front desk and handed over the printed "Stop Digging" page. The officer on duty looked up, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Ma'am, your name's Sherry Cottrell, right?" "Yes." He frowned at his screen. "There's already a report under your name. Filed last night." "That's impossible," I said. "I haven't been here since last month." He hesitated, lowering his voice. "It was also withdrawn. Signed and closed by you." I leaned closer. "By me?" He turned the monitor slightly. There it was, my name, my signature, dated 9:17 p.m., the same hour I'd been home staring at that message. For a second, I couldn't even speak. Then I exhaled slowly. "That wasn't me," I said evenly. "And you'll keep that report open?" "I'll bring proof." The officer nodded quickly, but his eyes drifted toward the back office. Through the glass, a man in a dark suit was watching us, pretending not to. I left without another word. Outside, the sun had come out, but it didn't warm anything. When I got home, I didn't bother taking off my coat. I set up a hidden camera above the printer and placed another near the window facing the street. I installed a second security system, this one offline, no cloud, no network, no one but me. Then I called Miles, an old friend from my early legal days. He'd gone into cybersecurity after one too many corporate betrayals. "Miles," I said when he answered, "I need you to trace something for me." Quietly. He didn't ask why. He never did. I sent him the log from my printer, the timestamp, and the footage gap from my cameras. An hour later, he called back. "You were right to be suspicious. That print command didn't come from your device. It came remotely from an IP address registered to Harlan Cottrell and Associates." I let the silence sit between us for a beat. Then I said, "He just signed his own fingerprint on my fear." Miles whistled softly. "You want me to build a report?" "Yes. Timestamp it, encrypt it, and send it to a private drive. Don't keep a copy." "You expecting a storm?" he asked. I glanced at the tire marks still faint on the street. "It's already here." By evening, the storm hit in a different form. My father's face appeared on the local news, live coverage from a charity gala downtown. Roxanne was next to him, smiling the way people do when they think their lives are still untouchable. He was mid-speech when I tuned in. "It's tragic," he said, voice smooth, measured. "When family members lose their way and forget where they came from." A slow burn lit in my chest. I didn't move, didn't blink. I just watched. Then, on the screen behind him, the slideshow started glitching. The next image appeared out of sequence, a scan ledger from his office, the one marked Widow's Fund reallocation. Then another. The email I'd photographed. The line about diverting money to PR. Gasps rippled through the crowd on screen. Harlan froze mid-sentence. Roxanne turned to look, her smile falling like a curtain yanked down too soon. I didn't move. I hadn't hacked a thing. Earlier that day, I'd sent those documents, anonymously, to a journalist I trusted to recognize corruption when he saw it. He'd done the rest. As the feed cut to commercials, I whispered, "You taught me control, Dad. I just learned precision." Within hours, the headlines started spreading. Philanthropist under fire for misuse of funds. Comments flooded in, some defending me, some condemning him, all confirming one thing: the silence was broken. But there was no satisfaction, not the kind movies promise. Just a stillness. A wait. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted dare. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, watching the light fade through the blinds. The city outside hummed like it always did, uncaring, endless. Then my phone buzzed. No number. No text. Just a voicemail. I pressed play. My father's voice filled the room, calm, deliberate. "You think this ends with files and screens? You just declared war, Sherry." I let the message play to the end. Then I replayed it. Once. Twice. His voice lost all meaning by the third time. I didn't delete it. I wanted it there, proof of the war he'd already started long before I ever fought back. I looked out the window one last time, whispering, "Then I'll fight it like one." The war had stopped being silent, and so had I. The morning news played like a drumbeat I couldn't silence. Every channel, every headline carried the same words: the Betrayal scandal. Faces I hadn't seen in years were suddenly back in my life, calling, texting, pretending they'd always believed in me. Some said I was brave. Some said I was reckless. I didn't answer any of them. Justice isn't applause. It's consequence. I made coffee but never drank it. My phone kept buzzing, notifications flashing like warning lights. Then one message stopped me cold. "Meet me today, courthouse, 2 p.m. No name. Just the letter T. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it. It could have been a setup, another trick from my father's circle. But something inside me, the same voice that had guided me through every betrayal, said it was Tanya. I couldn't explain how I knew. I just did. At 1:45, I pulled into the courthouse parking lot. The air was heavy, humid, the kind that stuck to your skin and slowed your breath. Tanya was there, standing by the curb, her hair pulled back, sunglasses hiding what I already knew: fear. When she took them off, I saw the bruise blooming along her cheekbone. "Tanya," I whispered. She gave a small, shaky laugh. "Guess I'm not great at pretending anymore." We sat on a bench, out of sight from the main doors. Her hands trembled as she dug through her purse and pulled out a small flash drive. "He made me sign papers," she said. "Affidavits saying you forged charity documents, that you stole money. I didn't know what he'd do if I refused. He said he'd ruin my family. But after what happened at the gala, I couldn't keep lying." The words came out in pieces, every one of them cutting through the air. She handed me the USB. "Everything's on here. Recordings. Meetings between him, Roxanne, and Henry Vale. They planned it all, the trust, the smear campaign, everything." I took it, feeling its weight, not just plastic and metal, but truth. "You just gave me the one thing he can't destroy," I said. "The truth." Her eyes filled, but she nodded. I hugged her tightly. We didn't need more words. By the time I left the courthouse, the sun was high, burning through the haze. I drove straight to meet my lawyer, the same friend who had helped secure the injunction earlier in the week. He looked at the files, the recordings, the timestamps. His expression hardened. "Once we file this, there's no going back. He'll come for you." I met his eyes. He already did. "I'm still standing." He nodded and started drafting the motion. The legal wheels began to turn, slow but unstoppable. Fraud. Coercion. Misappropriation. Words that once felt abstract now had teeth. As dusk fell, I drove to the mansion. Not out of recklessness, but out of need. I had to see him once more, not as a daughter begging, but as a witness bearing truth. The gate was open, like he was expecting me. I parked and walked up the path. Through the tall windows, I saw him in the study, glass in hand, staring at the fireplace though it wasn't lit. Roxanne stood nearby, rigid, eyes sharp with calculation. When I stepped in, neither of them moved. "You could have had everything," my father said finally. "All you had to do was stay quiet." I placed a small recorder on his desk. "Quiet is how you built this empire. I'm just tearing down the walls you made from silence." He laughed bitterly, slamming his glass against the desk. Whiskey splashed across the papers. "You're nothing without my name." I didn't flinch. "Then watch what happens when I stop using it." The silence that followed was heavy, a lifetime of unspoken things pressing down on both of us. Roxanne tried to interject, her voice cold. "You're destroying your own bloodline." I turned to her, calm. "Every accomplice eventually faces the mirror." Harlan's face turned red, veins showing along his temple. "You'll destroy this family." "No, Dad," I said softly. "You did. I'm just telling the truth." Something broke in him then, not anger, not pride, but fear. He sank into his chair, his hands shaking. For a moment, I saw not the tyrant who'd manipulated us all, but an old man drowning in his own lies. He whispered my mother's name like it might save him. It didn't. I turned and walked out. The air outside was cool, the night clear. My heart felt strange, not light, not heavy, just steady. Halfway down the drive, I heard sirens. Blue and red lights cut across the dark sky, painting the house behind me in flashes of justice. My phone rang. It was my lawyer. His voice was calm but firm. "It's done. The injunction went through. His accounts are frozen. He can't touch a thing." I pulled over at the edge of the road, exhaled, and looked back one last time. The mansion that once felt like a kingdom now looked small, fragile, like the man who ruled it. "I didn't destroy him," I said quietly. "I just stopped protecting him." And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was fighting anymore. I felt free. Sunlight filled the room before I opened my eyes. For a moment, I didn't move, I just lay there, listening. No buzzing phone, no hum of anxiety waiting in the dark corners. Just quiet. The kind that felt earned. When I finally turned on the TV, the headline rolled across the screen: Harlan Cottrell arrested for financial fraud. The anchor's voice was calm, almost rehearsed. They played clips from the gala, the leaked files, and interviews with legal experts discussing a daughter's courage. They called me the woman who broke the silence. I turned the volume down, watching their mouths move without sound. "I didn't break the silence," I whispered. "I reclaimed my voice." The coffee pot gurgled softly in the background. I opened the blinds and let the morning light flood the kitchen. Cars moved along the street, children laughed outside. For the first time in years, the noise of the world felt like music instead of chaos. Then came the knock. 3 slow taps on the door. When I opened it, Roxanne stood there. She looked nothing like the polished woman I remembered. Her hair was messy, makeup streaked, and her voice cracked before she spoke. "Please," she said. I didn't know what he was doing. I stepped aside, motioning her in. She hesitated, as if waiting for me to throw her out. Instead, I handed her a glass of water. She sat at the table, shaking. He cut me off. "The accounts, the house, all gone. The media says I was part of it, but I wasn't. You have to tell them, Sherry. Tell them I didn't know." Her eyes searched mine, desperate for the same mercy she'd never shown me. I studied her face, the same one that had smiled beside my father while my world was collapsing. "Roxanne," I said quietly, "redemption isn't something I can sign for you. You'll have to earn it yourself." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She looked at me for a long time before whispering, "You sound just like your mother." The words caught me off guard. I didn't respond. She left soon after, closing the door gently behind her. The apartment felt still again, but it wasn't empty. It felt settled. Later that afternoon, a courier arrived with an envelope. My name was written in a shaky hand I knew instantly. I opened it slowly. The paper smelled faintly of old cologne and dust. "You destroyed me," the letter began, "but maybe you saved what's left of us." He admitted things I never thought he would: the lies, the fear, the legacy of silence passed from his father to him, then to me. "I silenced you because I feared your strength. You reminded me of what I could never be." I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anger. Just a deep, quiet understanding. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside my mother's note, the one she'd written before she died. Two pieces of the same story, finally resting side by side. "I won't pass this silence forward," I said softly. By evening, I found myself at the courthouse again. I didn't need to be there, the outcome was already known, but I wanted to witness it. The room was hushed when Tanya took the stand. She spoke clearly, her voice strong, recounting every detail of the manipulation, the threats, the lies. When the judge commended her courage, she looked my way and smiled faintly. When it was over, I walked past the reporters outside. Cameras flashed, microphones reached toward me. "Ms. Cottrell, do you have a statement?" I shook my head. "This story isn't about fame. It's about freedom." And I kept walking. The courthouse steps led down to the same park I used to visit with my mother when I was a child. The old oak trees still shaded the same worn benches. I sat down on one and took the pendant she'd left me, small, gold, simple. "You gave me strength," I whispered. "Now I'll give it to someone else." I left the pendant on the bench. As I stood, a woman passed by with her little girl, laughing about something small and ordinary. I smiled, not at them, but at what they represented. The world kept turning. Life went on, softer now, but strong. On the drive home, I made a decision. I would start a foundation, for women who'd been silenced by family, fear, or control. I'd call it the Voice Fund. It wasn't about revenge or legacy. It was about passing on what I'd fought to reclaim. That night, I sat at my desk, recording a short message for the foundation's first event. My voice felt steady, grounded. "The truth doesn't always heal fast," I said. "But it does heal right. And sometimes, the loudest freedom comes after the quietest goodbye." I stopped the recording, took a deep breath, and pressed upload. Just as I leaned back, my phone buzzed. One new email. No sender, no name. Just a subject line, "You don't know the whole story." My finger hovered over the screen. For a long moment, I didn't move. The past was over, but its echoes had just begun to speak.